Hey, Jason from Fireplace BlowersOnline.com. We haven't done one of these videos in a while. It's been several years since we posted our last comparison video, but no better time than the present, I think. We've got a great example of a few things that we'd like to show you guys that really, I think, highlights some of the differences between some of the cheaper Amazon and eBay kits versus something that we put together here. So this particular kit is what we reference as an FK24 kit. It's a very popular fan kit used in hundreds of models of Majestic and Vermont Castings fireplaces. I'd say it fits about 90% of Majestic gas fireplaces. So a very popular model. And from just the pictures on the outside, they look very similar. But Jim and I've got Jim here. We'll bring Jim here in a second. We're going to actually point out a few of differences here that I think will highlight the reason why our kit's twice as expensive as the other cheaper stuff you're going to find online. So let's start with this kit. This is one of the cheaper kits, and by no means are we disparaging against any of our competitors online. So we will not mention any brand names at all. We're just going to point out some highlights of this. But let's start with this box. The box this is a variable speed control box. And Jim, why don't you spread the wires out here? Typically, two of the wire leads here are designated for a thermostat sensor. The other two leads connect directly to the motor. And in this case, the temperature sensor wasn't even included with it, so it's missing the temperature sensor. Another thing is that this box is basically a wrapped, it's very difficult to see, but it's just basically a single piece of flat tin that's been bent in several locations. The knockouts on here are actually open. They should actually be closed. It's actually an electrical risk for those things to be open. They should only be open where the actual grommet was inserted, but you can see several of them are open. One of them is actually, think it floating in the box, which in itself is dangerous. The grounding screw on the back is not actually a proper grounding stud. That's actually just a pointed screw that they put out from the back. You've got exposed wiring coming through the backside of the grommet here, which could also potentially be dangerous if any of those fray. So yeah, and again, it's tough to tell, but this is very thin gauged tin. So, and actually Jim just with basically, he can just bend it with his fingers pretty easily. A couple other things in the front of it, if I can show you this, they're using two different size screws, which we thought was pretty funny. But again, very cheaply constructed kind of speed control module. Still does the trick. What you can't see in there, it's tougher to see, there's actually a pretty cheap speed controller inside of that box. Most OEM manufacturers and people in the industry use a brand called KB Electronics, which is a very good controller. That is not a KB Electronics, that's an off-brand controller. Again, pretty cheaply made. So, okay, so that's a few things on the box itself. Again, electrical hazard. It's not the proper electrical box that this should be in. Open holes, opportunity for electrical failure. So, all right, let's move over to ours. These brackets are all made in Wisconsin. So these are all powder coated, so there's not a cheap plastic or cheap painted finish on them. Heavy gauge steel bracket. These are properly made. The right size screws in the front. If Jim can toss it around, there's actually a proper electrical box. That's a proper handy box that we actually wire up and assemble ourselves. That is a legitimate grommet that's going through there to make sure that those wires are securely fitted in there. You can see all of the holes are closed up on all sides of the box. There is a proper grounding nuts on here that's actually painted in anodized green, which it should be. And again, we're using the proper industry standard KB Electronics controller in there. So this is a very nicely made unit. These are made, assembled, all here in Wisconsin. And then obviously, yeah, we've got the thermostat sensor, so thanks for pointing that out. Without the thermostat sensor, it's very difficult for that kit to work. Okay, let's move over to the blowers. Again, just from the outside appearances alone, the blowers look to be pretty much the same, but there's definitely some differences that we'll point out here. First thing you notice is that on our blower, there's actual hardware included. So on an FK24 kit, excuse me, the wing nuts here that you see actually secure the blower to the back of the stove. There's also 2 additional wing nuts because in some cases there are studs that actually fit in there and help secure the speed controller down. So Jim will point those guys out. So the proper hardware is included, whereas the other cheaper kit here did not include the hardware. Let's point out brackets. Okay, obviously you can see that the blowers are both mounted to a bracket. These brackets are designed to mount the blowers to the rear of the fireplace on 2 threaded studs. In order to accomplish that, you've got to have the right slots on both sides of the bracket. And you'll notice on this kit, there are no studs. So definitely a requirement for drilling out holes and measuring will be required if you're going to buy this kit. And I'm going to have Jim flip over these brackets because another thing is that our bracket that's a 14 gauge galvanized steel bracket. It's made here in Wisconsin by one of our local fabricators. So a very stout, thick piece of steel. It's going to be tough to see, but if I move over to here, you can see that's a very thin gauge. You can actually tell by the warping and bending of the bracket. And so these will by all means transfer noise to the back of your fireplace a little more. And just to kind of demonstrate the flimsiness of these brackets, Jim will literally take his hand and he can bend that bracket in half. And I can guarantee you he's not going to do that with that bracket. So yeah, very much higher quality bracket we're using. So that's number 1. Number 2, blowers. Again, we're not going to disparage against the supplier of this guy, but they advertise it on Amazon and eBay as being a 100% ball bearing unit. So to test that claim, I'm actually going to have Jim. Let's take this guy apart. And so we've done nothing to this. This is out of the box. And so first thing we're going to do, I'll actually zoom before I zoom in on that, Jim, if I can come around to the side here. What Jim just took off here is basically a bearing bracket, and it holds an outside bearing in place. And as you can tell, that is a brass or a bronze sleeve bearing, so that is basically a standard bushing. And then it's being held, you can see there's basically like a felt line pad in there that's holding a certain amount of grease. So it's just holding a lubrication oil. That lubrication oil will wear out very quickly, and these guys tend to degrade pretty quickly. So, and again, we just took the outside bearing off. If I were to get you into a picture of the inside bearing, that is also sleeve, and I'll have Jim, there's also a bearing on the outside of the wheel here. We'll pop that off, and you'll actually see that the bearing on the end of the wheel, that little bronze bushing, is just a bronze bushing. So definitely not ball bearing. So false advertising in our opinion. And so again, I'll actually have Jim do the same with ours so you can kind of demonstrate that our claims are legitimate, that these are 100% ball bearing. We'll just have him take out the outside bearing in this case, and we'll pop the outside bearing off. Again, that is a ball bearing, and that's what it should look like. That is a sealed ball bearing, really high-end Japanese sealed ball bearings. So that guy's gonna last you for a while. We're using a high temp lubricant in those guys. And Jim, if you wanna pop that end bearing off too, just to kind of show you that. We have these specially made. They're tough to see in there, but
yeah, we'll just straighten it out.
Yeah, just to see if you can get a little bit of a glimpse. But again, that is a sealed ball bearing. So it's a specialized sealed ball bearing that we use on the ends of the wheels. So again, just a few differences. We do get a lot of questions in terms of why our kits are double the price. I mean, this goes to it. We've got American hands kind of assembling and doing all the wiring of these guys. Local fabricators for all the parts. We keep this stuff in-house as much as we possibly can, so we take a little bit of pride in putting these together. Very kind of smooth running unit. So, and again, this goes across a lot of the product line. We get a lot of these cheaper overseas kits that are made and redistributed across most of these distribution sites like Amazon and eBay, and they're privately labeled as other brands, but you pretty much get the same thing. So really appreciate your guys' time. If you guys have any questions with regards to any of the blowers at all or compatibility to your fireplace, don't hesitate to call us 262-989-4882, or you can visit us at fireplaceblowersonline.com or email us at support@fireplaceblowersonline.com. Thanks again.